your brain just made a judgment about this audio player in like 1/20th of a second.
It's incredibly fast.
Right. I mean, before you even consciously processed a single word we just said, your eyes took in the visual data of your screen, the surroundings, the lighting in your room, and you just immediately formulated a response.
Yeah, and the secret weapon driving that instant, totally subconscious judgment is color.
Exactly.
Because color, well, it bypasses our linguistic processing entirely. It doesn't need to be translated into words. It just triggers these biological and psychological responses before we even realize we're looking at something, you know?
Right. It dictates where your eye travels or like how you feel about a brand.
Yeah, or whether you perceive a space as safe or completely chaotic.
And when we were looking through the notes in that graphic design manual you sent us for today's deep dive, that's exactly what stood out to me. Our mission today isn't just to talk about what color is, but to like fundamentally deconstruct the mechanics of it.
Which is so important if you want to actually use it effectively.
Definitely. So we are going to explore why certain combinations feel biologically harmonious, how a single splash of pigment can act as an exclamation point in a noisy visual environment, and really how you, the listener, can wield these principles as a strategic communication tool in your own life.
Because understanding those mechanics is what separates a purely decorative choice from a highly intentional one. And the manual you provided really strips away the mysticism of art, I think, and grounds it entirely in raw physics and biology.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting with the actual physical reality of the wavelengths themselves. Because, you know, when you hold a bright red apple, the redness feels like a concrete property of the fruit.
Right, it feels like the apple is red.
Exactly. But the physics outlined in your notes tell a completely different story.
Yeah, what's totally fascinating here is that the apple has no inherent color.
Like, none at all.
None. Color is just a behavioral property of light. So in our physical environment, the specific hue you perceive is determined by how a surface absorbs and reflects different lengths of electromagnetic radiation.
Okay, so it's all about bouncing light.
Exactly. The surface of that apple is absorbing almost all the wavelengths of light hitting it, except for the longest visible wavelengths, which it just rejects. It bounces them away.
And those rejected bouncing wavelengths are what we actually call red.
You got it. And at the other end of the visible spectrum, you have violets and blues, which are the shortest, tightest wavelengths.
And then white and black sit at the totally extreme ends of that interaction.
Yeah.
Right? Because white isn't actually a color.
Right, it's
the chaotic combination of all visible wavelengths bouncing back at you simultaneously. Like all of them at once.
Yeah, and black is the total absorption. The surface is basically swallowing the light, and your eye is perceiving that absolute absence of reflected radiation.
And I think this is the crazy part. Those bouncing wavelengths only matter if there's a receiver to catch them.
Yes. The physical light is just half the equation. The other half is our biological hardware. Exactly. Inside the human eye, we have this incredible network of specialized photoreceptors, our rods and cones. And the cones are these highly sensitive instruments calibrated to differentiate the specific frequencies of those light rays.
It's basically like a highly advanced radio receiver. Like you aren't just seeing an object in front of you. Your visual system is actively tuning into the exact frequency of electromagnetic radiation bouncing off of it.
That's a great way to put it.
And this biological hardware has immense bandwidth. Like the notes say the human eye can discern an astonishing 10 million different colors.
10 million variations, which, if you think about it, explains why lighting changes absolutely everything.
Oh, right, because the light source changes.
Exactly. If you take that same apple outside at high noon versus looking at it under a dim, incandescent lamp in your living room, the frequencies bouncing off it change drastically. So your rods and cones report a completely different visual reality to your brain.
But, okay, if you're trying to design a presentation for work, or build a user interface, having 10 million distinct frequencies to tune into is pure paralyzing chaos.
Oh yeah, it's completely overwhelming.
So the manual you sent us details how professionals actually tame this biological reality by breaking color down into 4 foundational pillars: hue, saturation, temperature, and value.
Right, and hue is simply the specific wavelength, the pure color family itself, like red, blue, yellow.
It's just the basic name of the color.
Basically, yeah. And then saturation is the intensity or purity of that wavelength before any black or white dilutes it. So a highly saturated wavelength is piercing and vivid, while a desaturated one is kind of muddy and dull.
Got it. Then there is temperature, which the text notes is actually measured in degrees Kelvin. which I always found completely counterintuitive.
Really? How so?
Well, in actual physics, a higher Kelvin temperature, like, I don't know, 10,000 degrees, is what we see when we look at a blue hot star.
Right.
And a lower temperature, like 3,000 degrees, is a red or yellow dwarf. Yet, psychologically, we flip that entirely. We call the low temperature reds warm and the high temperature blues cool.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of human psychology just overriding raw physics. I mean, we associate reds and yellows with fire in the sun, right?
Right.
So our brains just interpret those wavelengths as physically warm, regardless of what the actual Kelvin scale says, and we associate blues with water and ice, so they inevitably feel cool.
That makes a lot of sense. But it's actually the fourth pillar that the manual isolates as the ultimate weapon in a designer's arsenal, which is value.
Yes, value is huge.
It's simply the relative lightness or darkness of a color. And the text claims this is the single most important tool because it dictates visual hierarchy. Like, the human eye will always travel to the area of highest value contrast first.
Because value establishes the actual architectural structure of whatever you are looking at. The source notes that the human eye can distinctly discern about 7 major steps of value, from pure white down to pitch black.
Okay, 7 steps.
Yeah. And if you place 2 identical shapes with the exact same value next to each other, your brain assigns them equal importance. But if you drop the value of one, like making it significantly darker, it instantly establishes a dominant and subordinate relationship. Value is the literal mechanism that creates movement across a page.
Wait, I have to challenge this hierarchy for a second.
Okay, go for it.
If I take a dull, mid-value gray circle and put it right next to a blindingly saturated neon pink circle, the neon pink is going to command all of my attention, right? It feels like the sheer retina-burning power of the hue itself would easily overpower simple lightness and darkness.
But that's the natural assumption, yeah. And the manual actually addresses this exact illusion.
Oh, really?
Yeah. On its own, a highly saturated hue absolutely draws the eye faster than a neutral gray, but the power of value is entirely relational.
Relational how?
Well, if you place that neon pink next to a neon green that shares the exact same underlying value, the exact same degree of lightness, they will clash violently.
Oh, right. They kind of hurt to look at.
Exactly. They vibrate against each other, but your eye won't know which one to land on first. There is tension, but there's no clear hierarchy. Altering the value, like darkening the green or lightening the pink, is literally the only way to tell the brain which element is actually more important.
I see. So value is like the volume knob, and hue is the specific instrument playing the note.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to think of it.
Because you can have a very intense instrument, but if the volume of everything in the mix is turned up to the exact same level, it's just a wall of noise. You have to lower the volume of the background instruments for the lead to actually cut through.
That is the precise mechanism. And once you have your values established, you can start combining the actual instruments, the hues, to create specific harmonies.
And this requires understanding the mixing models, right?
Yes. The manual draws a very hard line between the subtractive model and the additive model, and the physics behind why they behave so completely differently.
Right, because the subtractive model is what most of us grew up with, mixing physical paints or inks in, like elementary school art class.
Exactly.
And the additive model is what is happening on the screen you are likely looking at right now if you're holding your phone.
Yeah, and the reason the subtractive model is called subtractive is because physical pigments work by absorbing or subtracting light. When you mix multiple paint colors together, they absorb more and more wavelengths.
So they get darker.
Right. That's why if you mix every color in a traditional palette together, you just get a muddy, dark brown or black. You are literally subtracting all the light.
But the screen on your phone is additive. It doesn't rely on ambient light bouncing off of it at all. It emits light directly into your retina.
Which completely changes the rules.
Right, because when you mix different wavelengths of emitted light together, they add their energies. So mixing all the colors on an additive screen results in pure, blinding white light.
It's fascinating. But for the strategic harmonies outlined in your notes, designers actually rely on the traditional subtractive color wheel. They map out specific geometric relationships on this wheel to trigger predictable biological and psychological reactions.
And the most aggressive of these is the complementary relationship.
Yeah, that's 2 hues sitting directly opposite each other on the wheel, like red and green or blue and orange.
What I love about complementary combinations is the inherent contradiction. Like, they are literally as far apart on the visual spectrum as possible. They simultaneously attract and repel one another, creating this massive visual tension. It reminds me of a culinary dish that perfectly balances sweet and spicy,
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, because you are hitting two entirely opposite sensory receptors at the exact same time, and that contradictory push and pull is exactly what makes the experience so addictive and impossible to ignore.
And if that complementary tension is, say, too loud for the message you were trying to send, the manual suggests the split complementary or analogous palettes.
Okay, how does a split complementary work?
So split complementary takes that exact opposite color and splits it into the two hues sitting directly next to it on the wheel. It retains a lot of that visual interest and tension, but it lowers the vibration. It just feels a bit more sophisticated.
Whereas analogous palettes use colors sitting right next to each other on the wheel, like blues and greens.
Exactly.
And the biology behind why analogous colors feel so soothing is honestly fascinating. Because they sit next to each other, they reflect very similar wavelengths of light.
Right.
So your eyes, rods, and combs literally do not have to work as hard or expend as much biological energy to transition between them. The visual harmony is a direct result of biological ease.
It's so cool. But the manual is very careful to note that these strict physics and biological rules only take you so far. At a certain point, human perception becomes deeply subjective.
Right, because we don't experience color in a vacuum. We experience it in context.
Exactly. And to explain the subjectivity, your sources dive into the 1920s Bauhaus movement, specifically focusing on Johannes Itten and his student, Joseph Albers.
Two absolute legends in design.
Truly. Itten revolutionized color theory by arguing that a successful color palette operates on three distinct levels simultaneously.
Okay, what are the three levels?
First is the visual impression, so the raw physics of the light hitting the eye. Second is emotional expression, how the culture and psychology of the viewer interpret that light. And third is symbolic construction, how the colors are structurally organized to convey a specific message.
And then Joseph Albers took that second idea, the psychological interpretation, and proved just how unreliable our visual system can actually be.
Yes, he famously conducted this experiment where he asked 50 students in a room to just close their eyes and envision the color red.
Just red.
Just red. And he pointed out that you will have 50 completely different reds in their minds. Our memory, our cultural background, and our individual biology mean that absolute objective color is essentially a myth.
Wow.
Yeah. Albers actually dedicated his life to proving that a color's identity is entirely relative to its surroundings. Like, if you take a mid-tone gray square and place it on a stark white background, the gray appears quite dark.
Right, because of the contrast.
Yeah. But if you take that exact same gray square, reflecting the exact same physical wavelength of light, and place it on a pitch black background, it suddenly appears much lighter.
Even though it hasn't changed at all.
The physical light hasn't changed one bit, but your brain's interpretation of it has radically shifted based on the neighboring data.
So what does this all mean? Like, if putting one color next to another fundamentally alters how our brain perceives both of them, is every layout, every presentation you make, basically just a carefully constructed optical illusion?
I mean, essentially, yes. Your brain is not a passive camera lens simply recording wavelengths. It is an active processing engine, constantly trying to average out and interpret the visual data. And the manual highlights the Bezold effect as the ultimate proof of this.
Oh, the rug pattern guy.
Yeah. Wilhelm von Bezold, he was a German textile scientist trying to create new rug patterns. And he discovered that he didn't need to design an entirely new pattern to change the look of a rug.
You just had to change one thread.
Exactly, just one thread. If you have a complex interwoven pattern of, say, navy blue, maroon, and mustard yellow, and you simply swap the mustard yellow threads for bright white threads, the entire rug transforms.
That's crazy.
The navy suddenly looks much darker and richer, and the maroon shifts in tone entirely. You haven't touched the navy or maroon dyes at all, but because they are interwoven with a new value, the brain averages out the optical mixture differently.
So the brain is constantly trying to solve the visual puzzle in front of it.
Constantly.
Which leads to what might be the single most mind-bending biological quirk detailed in your notes, the complementary afterimage.
Oh, this is my favorite part. This phenomenon demonstrates the human visual system's desperate, ongoing quest for equilibrium. Our biology is always seeking a neutral balance.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When you stare fixedly at a solid block of color, say, bright red square, the specific cones in your retina that are tuned to receive that long red wavelength are firing continuously.
Right.
And eventually, they chemically deplete their photopigments. They literally get fatigued. and your visual system panics. It senses this overwhelming flood of red data and a lack of opposing data, and it attempts to force a neutral balance.
And it forces that balance by having the brain generate a phantom image.
A hallucination, basically.
Yeah. If you stare at that red square for 30 seconds and then quickly look at a blank white wall, you won't see a blank wall. You will see a glowing green square. Your brain invents the exact complementary color, matching the precise value and intensity of the original red, just to neutralize the visual fatigue.
It's acting exactly like visual noise-canceling headphones.
Oh, that's spot on.
Because noise-canceling headphones listen to the ambient frequency of the room and play the exact opposite frequency into your ear to zero out the sound. Your brain is pumping the opposite visual frequency into your consciousness to zero out the fatigue.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you realize this isn't just biological trivia. Master designers and communicators actually weaponize this quirk.
They weaponize our tired eyes.
Basically. They know that your eye has a physical, chemical need for symmetry and neutrality. So when they use complementary colors in a layout, they are anticipating your cone fatigue. They are voluntarily providing the exact opposing wavelength your brain is craving, which creates a feeling of deep, satisfying resolution for the viewer.
Okay, so armed with the physics of light absorption, the volume knob of value, the psychological relativity of the Bauhaus masters, and the noise-canceling biology of our retinas, how do we practically apply this?
Right, how do we use it?
Your notes actually outline some incredibly pragmatic systems for putting this into practice.
They do. The most robust framework provided is the dominant, subordinate, and accent system.
Okay, break that down for us.
So it prevents that wall of noise we talked about earlier. You select one dominant hue to carry the primary emotional weight of your message. Then you use a subordinate hue, usually an analogous color, or a shifted value to support it without fighting for attention. And then you use a highly saturated accent color in tiny strategic doses to direct the viewer's eye exactly where you want it to go, like a call to action button on a website or a critical data point on a graph.
That makes a ton of sense. Another incredibly practical approach in the notes is the meaning-based method.
Yes.
With this, you don't start with what looks pretty. You start with the emotion of the message. If you're delivering a sobering financial update, you might start with a deep, stable blue. Then, you find its exact mathematical complement on the color wheel. You adjust the volume knobs, the values, so they don't vibrate against each other, and you instantly have a scientifically sound, biologically satisfying palette.
And this raises an important question that's addressed in the text. In an era where we have access to millions of hex codes and digital colors for free, why do the most sophisticated designs often use the fewest colors?
That's a great question.
The manual heavily advocates for extreme restraint, like using one color or two color palettes.
Which is funny, because in the days of physical offset printing, restriction was an economic necessity. Like, every new color meant paying for a new metal plate to be burned.
Exactly, it was expensive.
But today, restriction is a strategic weapon. We operate in a totally oversaturated visual market where everyone is screaming at maximum volume with 10 different colors. A layout that restricts itself to variations of just a single hue cuts through that noise. It signals confidence.
And it forces you as the creator to rely entirely on value to build your hierarchy, which we established earlier is the most powerful architectural tool you have.
There is also a brilliant hack in the source material for those designing physical goods, letting the substrate, the paper itself, act as an active color in your palette.
Oh, I love this technique.
Right. By using a textured or colored stock, you get a complex, multicolor visual effect while only managing a single ink. But that philosophy applies digitally too. If you treat the background canvas of your slide deck not as an empty void, but as an active, intentional color choice, and restrict your text and shapes to just one or two complementary hues, you create a cohesive, authoritative environment.
Because you are intentionally managing the biological energy the viewer has to expend to understand your message. You are literally doing the visual processing work for them.
So, to synthesize this entire manual you sent us, we moved from the cold physical reality of wavelengths bouncing off surfaces to the 10 million frequencies our rods and cones are tuning into. We learned to control that massive bandwidth using value as our master volume knob. We explored how complementary colors create a sweet and spicy tension, while analogous colors provide biological rest.
Yeah.
We saw how the Bauhaus masters proved that color is always relative to its neighbors, and we uncovered the bizarre truth that our own brains will literally hallucinate phantom colors just to maintain equilibrium.
It's wild. It fundamentally changes how you interact with the built environment around you. I mean, every warning sign, every application interface, every piece of packaging you see is a highly calculated manipulation of light, biology, and human psychology.
It really is. Which brings us to a final, somewhat provocative thought to chew on, directly inspired by the core physics outlined in your notes.
Okay, let's hear it.
The manual states unequivocally that color is a behavioral property of light reflecting off a surface, which must then be interpreted by the biological hardware of a human eye. So, imagine you were sitting in a vibrantly colorful room, and suddenly all the lights go out, pitch black.
Right.
Do the objects around you actually lose their color? If color absolutely requires both bouncing light and an active human retina to be perceived, does color even exist at all when no one is looking at it?
Wow. It is the ultimate visual equivalent of a tree falling in the forest.
Oh, exactly. Something to ponder the next time you make a snap judgment about a piece of design in 1/20th of a second. Did you just see what was there, or did your brain actively construct exactly what it needed to see? Keep sending us these fascinating notes and enjoy the rest of your day.